Welcome to Hope Talks. I'm Dr. Charles Montorio-Archer, the President and CEO at One Hope United. Hope Talks are a conversation with industry experts and thought leaders on issues of protecting children, strengthening families, and stabilizing communities. Our guest today is Katelyn Brewer, the President and CEO of Darkness to Light. And our conversation today will center on creating a better future for children by preventing child abuse. Welcome, Katelyn.
Thank you so much for having me, Charles.
I'm so excited to have you here for this important topic and this important conversation. So let's just jump right in. Please tell us a little bit about who you are and about the work you do at Darkness to Light.
Sure. So I have been with Darkness to Light for about 5 years, closing in on my 5-year anniversary. And Darkness to Light is a 20-year-old organization that teaches adults how to prevent child sexual abuse. And you might wonder, well, how is it possible to prevent child sexual abuse? The reality is it's very preventable, and anyone, whether you have kids or not, can be a safe adult in society. So we have a 2-hour training that is our flagship training that was created about 17 years ago, that we've trained more than 2 million adults in 50 states and 76 countries, I think, worldwide. And that training really helps you recognize the signs, proactively engage and report, child sexual abuse. So we're incredibly proud. We have about 13,000 facilitators, volunteer facilitators who partner with us, and countless organizations across the country who have implemented our training in their communities. So grateful.
Well, congratulations on your 5 years at Darkness to Light,
Thank
as
you.
well as the expansive reach of the work that you've been doing. That's just absolutely amazing. Maybe tell us a little bit about how did you get to this work? How did you come into just child abuse prevention?
Sure. So I worked actually in a completely different sector before working at Darkness to Light. I was the regional director of business development for an organization called Africare, which means that I was in lots of different African countries helping the implementation teams build out new and interesting projects for grants, et cetera. And so what I realized is that, when I was doing that work, everything is so interconnected. It doesn't matter whether I was building an agriculture proposal or a health system strengthening proposal, of women's empowerment. Each of those components networked in with some of the other issues that the team was working on. So um, as I sort of grew into that profession and decided I really love the work that I'm doing, but I miss my nephew and all his birthdays, and I want to come home and do work here in the United States, I was recruited for this position. And I asked myself, because I have a bleeding heart, why had I never heard about child sexual abuse as a cause that an organization would focus on entirely? And so the more, that I've gotten to know this issue, the more I realize that I'm actually the exact person who should be focused on child sexual abuse prevention, because it's somebody who has a big heart, who cares about kids, who cares about the safety of communities, who should be educated enough to be able to sort of spot those signs and move things forward. So when I joined, we only had our training at that point in time, and we had a number of other projects, but it wasn't all interconnected in terms of a social behavior change, like a real systemic change in society. Similar to, and I always talk about seatbelt usage. We didn't wear seatbelts 30 years ago, 40 years ago now. I'm getting old. Um, and, what was it that sort of influenced us to wear seatbelts? It was the click it or ticket campaigns. It was your car beeping at you. It was your mom, sort of looking in the rearview mirror and threatening not to leave and bring you to pizza with your friends if you don't put your seatbelt on. So those things over time really influence small micro behaviors. And child sexual abuse or child abuse prevention is no different. There are small things that adults can adopt every day that aren't accusatory or anything like that, that help create safer environments for kids.
I love the whole concept of safer environments for kids. Just
Mhm.
thinking about all of the spaces and places that kids are that don't always seem, as safe as possible. When I think about education, advocacy, and research, and think about the fact that this is, Child Abuse Prevention Month, what is the work that you're doing to make this more of a yearly discussion, not just during this month of awareness?
Yeah, of course. That's a great question. So I'm part of, Darkness Light is part of the Keep Kids Safe Coalition. So you can go to keep-kids-safe.org. And we're asking President Biden to basically copy the Australian Royal Commission, which was a study all about the effect of child sexual abuse in Australia. So we would like him to replicate that as a presidential commission during his administration. We've also really been articulating the need for increased funding in some of the COVID bills around treatment and prevention. So working a lot with other organizations in that coalition to be able to work on that. And we're actually trying to get April 8th to be announced as the International or World Day for Child Sexual Abuse Prevention, Healing, and Justice. And you might think those all sort of seem very high level, but don't forget, going back to that seatbelt example, it takes all different levels of society to change to influence my individual behavior. And so if I'm seeing this topic on an international and a national level, I'm realizing that it is of that level of importance. And so I'm more willing to pay attention to those day-to-day nudges that I'm receiving in my life.
Well, when you think about, and I'm glad you talk about the levels of the advocacy and the outreach that all of this work takes, both at your shop and both here at One Hope United. But when you think about every state and how they legislate or how they implement their regulations, et cetera, what are you seeing is the common barrier by state? And then also kind of what is the solution in order to kind of shift some of this on a more local level, not just at the national level?
Yeah, I mean, it's so common for all of our topics that we work on. It's money. I mean, you have seen there are a couple different laws at the state level that you might hear about. You might hear about Aaron's Law, you might hear about Jenna's Law. And both of those have some sort of component to mandate training for, youth serving organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs or YMCA's, et cetera, and schools. And so in those, they will define what a mandated reporter is. So in a lot of states, that's basically it's a bunch of professions that have to deal with kids. In some states, it's every single citizen of that state. The reality is most people don't know, particularly in those states, that they are mandatory reporters. And what does it mean to be a mandatory reporter? What are the legalities around not reporting? And so when you don't have a funded mandate, so if you pass an Aaron's Law or a Jenna's Law and you don't put money behind actually rolling out that campaign, both from a communications and an education standpoint, you basically have ceremoniously passed a law. So you all look good and you can pat yourselves in the back, but it's not really being implemented. And schools and youth serving organizations are struggling to compete with gun safety law or mandated training and child sexual abuse training and bullying training and internet safety training. I mean, there's so much that they're responsible for. So I think that's part of it. I will say the other component of it, honestly, Charles, is the enforcement aspect. So again, you've passed the law and hope in some 2 states, there's money. So even in those states where people are more educated, the enforcement aspect still isn't necessarily where it needs to be in terms of pushing people to actually be mandated reporters because there's a consequence if you aren't. So those are a couple of different things that I could think about in terms of the state level.
When I think about the unfortunate aspect that we have to have this level of advocacy because of this issue, I think of the fact that we are fortunate to have you at the helm of a lot of these efforts to make sure that we're in a position to prevent child abuse where we can, especially. So with that in mind, my last question is, where do you see hope, and why do you have hope?
I'm a hopeful person anyway. I believe that anything can be solved with a positive attitude and maybe a Gen X commitment to getting it done. And so I would say that, even in the 5 years that I have been part of this community working on child sexual abuse prevention, I have seen more collaboration year over year. I've seen more donors interested in understanding where their money's going to and how their money can affect the safety of children and communities. I've seen survivors come out and talk about really personal, very intense traumatic experiences in order to catapult this conversation in society at a different level. And quite frankly, I'm seeing more movement at the federal level looking to sort of standardize some of the things that I was just talking about in terms of mandated reporters and whatnot, which will clarify for many people what's necessary. Um, and then I just see, our grassroots facilitators in all of their communities, they have been pounding the pavement for almost 20 years, having these difficult conversations. And so those leaders give me such inspiration and hope and strength in order to continue to do what we do every day at Darkness to Light. So it's people, it's focus, it's the inclusion now of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our industry, and talking about that on a more steady basis. There's lots of things to be hopeful about.
Well, I'm glad to definitely share in your hope and look forward to meeting you on the front lines in this advocacy space around protecting our children, and obviously strengthening our families. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much for watching this episode of Hope Talks. If you haven't seen any of the previous episodes, they're on our YouTube channel and all our social media networks. And I look forward to our next episode where we're able to share how we might be able to change the world slowly by implementing more hope. So thank you.